welcome to the Diablo Podcast. I am your host, Xanth, and today I am joined by Thunderclaww.
Hello.
All right, we're up and running this time. And today we're going to do something that the Diablo Podcast has not done in, I hate to say it, a few years. We're going to talk about Diablo. The last time I actually had this up and running, I was talking to Chris Wilson from Grinding Gear Games, and a lot has transpired since then. Most importantly, Diablo 4. Diablo 4 has been announced. We don't know what date. We don't know. Well, we don't know a lot, but the best part, and honestly the thing that has invigorated me the most, is the rampant speculation phase of any Diablo game. That's what got me to the site years ago when Diablo 3 was announced, and I feel that running through my veins. And Thunderclaww, I know you have played the demo. You were at BlizzCon. Can you just run me through that scenario? You went there. You had to know that Diablo 4 was at least somewhat on the horizon. How did it feel to actually see the announcement?
I mean, this was an amazing BlizzCon. Even the days leading up to it, yeah, everyone had a sense of Diablo 4 coming. Something was in the works, Diablo related. But just the small little things popping up here and there. The art book got leaked a little early. There were signs everywhere before BlizzCon saying, the opening ceremony has mature content and parents should be advised for their children. So, the hype was rolling. The opening ceremony and the announcement for the Diablo 4, that cinematic trailer, oh my god, that was amazing.
Absolutely beautiful.
Just probably one of the best, if not the best, cinematics that Blizzard has put out, and really, I think setting a good tone for Diablo 4. Like that flesh cape that Lilith was wearing.
Yeah, a little foreskin-esque, but definitely on point for Diablo. Now, before we get into your initial feeling, let's get a little background. What's your history with the Diablo franchise? What brings you to BlizzCon excited about Diablo? Like, what's your history?
Sure. Yeah, so I started playing with Diablo 2. My dad and I used to play back when I was much younger and definitely not supposed to be playing rated M games. Diablo 2 was the game that I played basically up until Diablo 3 released. Since then it's been a little bit less video gamey, but I'd say the Diablo universe has definitely taken a majority of my gaming hours. This was my 7th BlizzCon that I've been to, and I think every year it's just a lot of fun to see friends that show up, meet new friends at BlizzCon, check out all the cool announcements, play some demos if there's some time.
Right.
And yeah, I think this one definitely was the best one of them all.
So, it's hard not to talk about, obviously, your reaction, and I feel like I'm just teasing it at this point. But before we get to it, you said you've gone to 7. You were at the last one, correct?
Yep.
So, after Diablo Immortal, you have to be just a little bummed. I mean, you're getting pumped. Did Diablo Immortal last year make you feel even more excited having seen than Diablo 4?
I guess I should also preface this. I forgot to mention, as you mentioned in the intro, I'm a subreddit moderator for the Diablo subreddit. And so when I go to the events, I also help cover them with live threads and kind of help organize a lot of the stuff that happens on the internet. So I guess giving a little context, last year I was honestly caught off guard when the first panel after the opening ceremony last year was a Diablo panel.
Right.
I wasn't expecting anything. I thought an announcement for Diablo 4 last year was just out of the question before we saw that. So there was a bit of kind of like unanticipated hype building last year that I don't think was met,
Right.
to put it gently. And yeah, just the feeling last year was very strange at BlizzCon itself. Just all of the people that were interested in, invested in the Diablo community, everyone was like, "Oh, okay." So it's not very exciting to announce a phone game to a primarily PC audience of your hardcore fans.
Correct.
So yeah, I think this year, between leaks and just kind of hints, teasers here and there, I think everyone was coming in with a much greater, maybe some more well-tempered expectations, but still quite a bit of hype that, the next big Diablo thing was going to be announced, and it was something that people were excited for.
Absolutely. So, we get a little background. You've been invested in the Diablo community for years, and you finally see Diablo 4. What's the feeling?
I mean, this cinematic aside, because cinematics are not representative of gameplay.
Right. I mean, Diablo Immortal had a pretty good cinematic. I mean, I liked it.
Yeah. It's a Blizzard cinematic. It's hard not to like.
Right.
I don't think I can point to a single bad one for its time.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know. The moment that I saw that. That first glimpse of Diablo 4 during the gameplay trailer, where you see that isometric camera, but with like a nice, clean engine and the colors, I just felt like a bit of relief inside. Because up until that moment, I still was a little worried. I was like, oh no, what if they take Diablo 4 in a completely different direction?
Well, there were some leaks and some rumors out there about it going to be almost like a shooter in some respects.
Yeah, something like over the shoulder, Dark Souls-esque, or
right.
I don't know. I up until that moment, I still had oh my god, what if it's not something that is similar to previous Diablo games? What if it's completely different? Am I gonna like it?
Now, tangentially, I mean, do you think that is a feeling you would have carried 3 years ago at BlizzCon with an announcement if it wasn't for Diablo Immortal, and wondering whether or not they were going in the right direction?
If Diablo 4 was announced 3 years ago?
Well, no, I'm saying in prior to the announcement. Did Diablo Immortal change the way you might have viewed what they could do with the Diablo franchise?
I don't think it was the Diablo Immortal specifically. It's more of maybe a shifting of values at Blizzard, and there's been a lot of, I don't want to say drama, but a lot of news coming out of Blizzard over the past couple of years, where a lot of the very front-facing people of Blizzard leaving for different companies.
Kind of an over-activization, if you will, of Blizzard.
I like that.
Yeah. And that is something that we have seen in years past. We've seen a lot of the notable names that have grown the games that we love depart. And I think that is a natural fear of when your franchise is left in the hands of somebody who didn't raise it, what it might turn out to be.
Right. So I'd say, yeah, maybe 3 years ago, if we had the same Blizzard as we had then, I wouldn't have felt that seed of doubt, but I'm not feeling that anymore.
That's awesome. That is awesome. And I think it's great to hear, because I know you've been in the Diablo community for years. It's nice to hear from people who have been invested for such a long time. Because there's a group of people that are just coming into Diablo right now, or their only experience was Diablo 3, and I think that opinion is harder to necessarily take in. It's not to say it's not valid, but I come from like a much older school mentality, and I liked Diablo 2 best. And hearing people who grew up in that say those kind of things about Diablo 4 is optimistic for me, I guess.
Yeah, it's exciting times we live in.
Absolutely. And now we get to spend 2, 3, maybe even 4 years speculating what's going to turn up. So you see the gameplay, you see the characters. Was there anything that disappointed you from what you initially saw before you played it at all? Like anything that was disappointing or that you were maybe just hoping you might have seen at that time?
Honestly, I think the only thing that really gave me pause for a little bit was the mounts.
Okay.
In the demo, or I guess it wasn't available in the demo, but in the gameplay trailer, they showed that the heroes were traveling across in mounts, and that just kind of took me aback for a moment, thinking, "Wait a second, like what is this? What are we turning into World of Warcraft, or I don't know
Right.
what?" I I still don't know how I feel about the mounts. I think I want to see more of it, but it's a new development.
Right.
I'm not against new things coming to the Diablo universe, especially if it makes sense and if it's added in appropriately.
Absolutely. I mean, if it works and it doesn't feel just like a cash grab to sell celestial ponies or whatever else it might be, then
I do want to ride a celestial pony, though.
see, there it is, and that's how they get your credit information. And
No,
hey,
have that.
I mean, I will buy a celestial pony if it keeps a great game going. I'm a huge fan of Path of Exile. I will buy expansion packs there just for the same concept. I'm happy to keep a game going if it's a game I like. I'm not opposed to that in Diablo 4. I know the box model doesn't necessarily pan out as well as it used to. So whatever they might explore, if it works, great, as long as the game itself is solid. So speaking of which, you get to play it. You are one of the few people out in the world who can say, "Hey, I played a little Diablo 4 in my day." What is that like? I mean, obviously you get a choice. You have a sorceress, you have a barbarian, and you have a druid. Now, I don't know what you chose first, but if I had to guess, I would guess druid. Am I wrong?
No, you win a prize.
Oh, I win just, I guess, foresight, but I would assume it's the class nobody's played in years, and it also looked the most exciting. So run us through that playthrough. What is it like? How did it feel? I guess. I mean, I think that's probably the most important question. How did it feel?
Yeah, because the game is going to change from what I played at the demo to what it eventually comes out as, probably drastically. But as long as the feel is there, that's the most important. And I think they start off really well with just the character selection screen that they had, with the three different classes standing around that iconic fire pit from Diablo 2. Like just having that made me feel like, wow, this is they're doing the right things. They're making the right choices, like referencing previous games without it being like in your face.
Right, right, and I did personally love seeing that as well. It harks back to the amount of time that I spent just kind of staring at the character selection screen in Diablo 2, watching him sit around the fire and agonizing whether it was going to be another necromancer or an Amazon, or if I was finally going to play a sorceress.
Yeah, it's just good. The characters are there. The classes are exuding their personality. It's not like you're reading, what they do on a list.
Right.
So it's always a good sign there. Yeah, I started with the druid. I played, I think, 80% of my time in Diablo 2 as a druid.
Okay.
So I needed to see what it was all about.
Nice.
And yeah, I mean, I just had a blast. The demos were 20 minutes long, and the time just flew by exploring. I didn't spend too much time like looking at the nitty gritty of going through every skill and every talent choice in there. I just wanted to kill some demons, some monsters as the druid, and I mean
Now,
the druid felt real smooth. And from everyone that I chatted with, I think everyone agreed that the druid was probably the most, I don't know, the smoothest gameplay that was there.
nice. So from your Diablo 2 times as a druid, what was your main play style? Were you going in werewolf? Were you going in werebear? Were you going more elemental?
Yeah, I honestly I like the wind druid
Okay.
build the most. I played my fair share of werewolf, werebear, summon mancer,
Right.
not summon mancer, a summon druid being okay, good enough, but not the greatest.
Correct. And it seems like the Diablo 4 druid is kind of a mix of everything, and we don't know end game or what it can transpire to, but it seems like you have a lot of quick shifts. You're never really fully rooted in anything. How did that feel by comparison of your time as a Diablo 2 druid when you made a choice and you just stayed as a bear or you stayed as a wolf for the entire duration?
I liked it. I liked the seamless transition. So one thing that I do want to clarify, which I've seen maybe conflicting information about, but like at BlizzCon, I feel like I was told multiple times by developers that you will be able to choose a specific form and stay in that form regardless of like what skills you choose.
Okay.
I don't think it was available in the demo, which is why I think there's a lot of conflicting information.
I think that's good information to have out there too. It's something that I myself was a little concerned about where I'm like, hey, I really, from a hardcore standpoint, I loved being a werebear because I had a bunch of health and I felt, yeah, I'm not going to do as much damage, but my probability of death was a little smaller. So as a result, that was my path that I really liked to take. And then seeing the quick shifts, I'm like, no, but I want to be a bear and not die.
Yeah, I'm interested in seeing that system kind of further developed. I just don't think it was ready or something that they wanted to highlight with the demo. But I did enjoy the quick shifts from one to the other. Like I would start off as the human version of the druid, throw out a boulder to knock some enemies back, then charge through them as a werewolf, and on the other side I'd ground slam as a werebear, and it was nice. Like the animations were crisp, the transitions were super smooth, and the damage may not have been there, but that was just probably the tuning of the demo.
Right, and I mean, obviously, the demo is not there for you to test the end game or anything like that, but to really just get a feel for it. So we talked a little bit about Druid. I mean, if you were to pick a favorite, skill that you got to use during the demo, what would you say it was?
Oh, it was Upheaval by the Barbarian.
Really?
Oh man, Upheaval was so good. I I can't tell you how many times I talked about Upheaval after BlizzCon ended. It's just the animation was so crisp. Like it really felt. So this was important to me. Like it really felt like I was taking a two-handed weapon, you know, raking it through the ground and just throwing that ground at my enemies. Like there was some umph, some heft to using Upheaval, and I think that's something that was missing and still is missing from Diablo 3 is that there's like a cast animation. There's a little bit of delay before whatever you're doing actually takes effect, and I think it adds to, I don't know, the reality of your character actually doing what he wants to do. It's not, you know immediately hitting something with a hammer. It's no, you're lifting out that hammer and you're moving it through the ground to impact the world and the enemies in front of you.
Now, in terms of pacing, because I mean, obviously, Diablo 2, it starts slower and you do get more powerful and you do start clearing whole screens, but it before you got a massive proliferation of really powerful items, the game was definitely slower. Whereas Diablo 3 like started fast and then just got faster. Everything I've seen, it seems like Diablo 2 or Diablo 4 it seems to have that mix where it feels a little bit slower. Am I correct in that? Did it feel slower?
Yeah, so I think Diablo 3 has a lot of movement skills built in, um, which, it's the game that it is. So the game necessitates these movement skills. Greater Rifts are time based, so you're always kind of pushing that. And I didn't see any like specified like fast movement skills in the three classes aside from teleport on the sorceress, which is kind of iconic to it.
Right.
So and all of the skills definitely took longer than you might expect them in Diablo 3 to take. So I think the developers definitely want to slow the game down a little bit from kind of the fast pace of Diablo 3. The leap animation, for example, for the barbarian, that is not a fast leap animation. You are not like leaping everywhere. You are just jumping up. You're like up in the air, and then you land with an impact.
Do you? I'm trying to think of the way to go about phrasing this. Do you think that's a good move by comparison to where we've been before with Diablo 3 to slow it down? Or do you think the fan base is so used to going fast that they're just going to try and get there anyway?
I think it's a good move. I think it really does add a little bit more impact to what you're doing in the game. Obviously, it will depend on the end game, and that's where most people are probably going to be playing at, and how that's balanced, I can't tell you.
Right.
But I think slowing down the pace a little bit from the D3 version is important. It really it lets enemies survive for a little bit longer. It lets them actually have an impact on the screen and on you as a character. It makes you feel a little bit more part of the world.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly would agree with that. I found Diablo 3 eventually to just get too fast where it wasn't as entertaining. Even Path of Exile has that kind of problem where you just get to a point where if you're not killing the entire screen, you're going too slow. I like that slowed down gameplay because then also it has that feeling of danger. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
see you, I know you are attacking me. I'm not going to kill you right away, so I need to think about this. Um, and then when I do like defeat you, it feels more earned as opposed to I just loaded up with whatever was most powerful, and you died before I even got to that particular screen, and that just isn't as exciting to me.
Yeah, exactly. I'm assuming later on when you're partying with people and you're working together, it's not one person is just zipping across, killing everything, as sometimes happens in like rifts in Diablo 3, and you're just like, I want to fight something, but I haven't seen anything in 5 minutes because I'm just chasing this other guy.
Absolutely, and I think that kind of ties into the world bosses, which seem to be designed to not be able to be taken down necessarily by just one person who's overly geared and you're just struggling to keep pace with. Did you get a chance to fight that particular world boss that they had set up in the demo?
Yeah, so the demo they had a Shaba, this huge monster that uh, popped out of the ground and started attacking. I I don't know about the world bosses yet. I'm not sold on them. Not
Okay.
that I won't be, but it it's the only time that your camera unlocks from having your character kind of stuck in the middle of your screen, and
Okay.
so it was a little jarring. Um, I know Diablo 3 on console, your character isn't in the middle if you're playing couch co-op, but I don't play a lot of that, so I'm not used to it.
Right.
Um, it was a little strange. There were, and I don't know how well my character was geared for it in the demo as well. But there definitely were mechanics that one shot me or two shot me, but then I'd respawn uh, a screen away and run back into the action. I don't think it's a fair test of the world boss system, so I'm intrigued by some of the things that they're trying with it, but I'm not completely sold on it yet.
Yeah, at least from my initial thoughts, I mean, I thought it was nice to see something new. Something that hadn't been done really before in the Diablo franchise.
Oh, but these are a thing in Diablo Immortal.
Oh.
Yeah, I think they are pulling a couple things here and there from what they've done in Diablo Immortal. One of which is these kind of world bosses that, I mean, Diablo Immortal's not out yet, but they did announce it last year as kind of a feature.
Well, that just shows what happens when I don't pay attention to that particular game. So I'm going to pretend that that doesn't exist, and I think it's really cool that they've introduced it for Diablo 4. I think it has I think you're right. It has a lot of potential. It's going to really depend on what they go about doing with it. I think of like world bosses from World of Warcraft, and those were fun when they were first introduced, but then like you kind of figured out like, okay, it's not worth the time, or nobody's doing this particular boss because of particular loot that's on it or whatever it is. And it would be sad to see something like that happen in Diablo 4, where like, hey, we've created this instance where you can draw in like 100 people or whatever it is, and nobody really wants to do them because it's not worthwhile.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I would be definitely more interested if they could tie it to the clan thing somehow. So they talked about clans briefly as a thing that they're interested in. If I could say, hey, there's this boss spawning, and I can take people just from my clan to go and kill it, rather than random people that show up in my instance or in my phase, I think that's a little bit more interesting, because I can say, oh, this guy's spawning over here, come on, can I get like a group of 10 people and we're all in voice chat and we're all killing it, kind of a little bit more like raid bosses from WoW.
Yeah, I like that. If anybody in the Diablo community happens to be listening, write that down. Because who knows? I like that concept. I always thought that clans were really underutilized in Diablo 2. Diablo 3, it felt more like face service, like, hey, you guys are all underneath this, and you got like, I forget how many are actually involved, but it was really just a location that people had. There was nothing to really bind you. It was basically just another chat, which is nice. But after Diablo 2, like that expectation for what Diablo 3 would have for a clan was much higher, and I don't think they really improved on that. So being able
sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah, just being able to do something more with that, because clans at the time in Diablo 2 were really cool. Like, hey, I have a group of people that I can message, and we can go and kill Ball 500 times or whatever it is. Now, if you're able to do that, but then actually have a little more functionality to it in Diablo 4, that would be amazing.
Yeah, it was added on post-release in Diablo 3, and I think it kind of shows that it was added on, but it wasn't built like into the system from the beginning. So it's hard to do any sort of balancing or any sort of integrations if it has to be added on after the fact rather than integrated in from the beginning.
And I think you bring up an interesting point to kind of go into, is what gets left off. I think Diablo 3 it's notable for a lot of things, but one of the things that I really think of when it comes to it is the promises they didn't keep, and one of those was PvP. We were told we were getting PvP for a long time, and it never came to fruition. There was a brawling mode, which I think everyone can argue is awful. But we never got that. If you were in looking at your experience with Diablo 4 right now and what we've been told, if there was something you think they won't be able to put in, what would you say it was?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I mean,
Because it's really easy right now to make a lot of promises and to say, hey, this is what we're going to do. And I do think they've done a pretty good job of tempering some expectations and saying we're going to explore things and what have you. But there's always something that doesn't make the cut. That crunch time will eventually happen, even in Blizzard soon terms, or as they're saying, not even Blizzard soon. Something will get dropped. I'd be curious what it ends up being.
Um, yeah, that's a great question. I doubt it will be PvP again, just because.
That could be the new Diablo tradition, though. We will promise you PvP, but would you rather have the game, or do you want to have the game a year from now with PvP?
I think they placed too much emphasis on it right now. They mentioned that we're designing skills with PvP in mind, and everything like talents, gear, everything with PvP in mind. So I don't know. That would be interesting for how they handle that. You know, that's a good one. I'll have to think about that one. I could imagine some end game content isn't fully in, and that gets added on later as like a free patch.
Yeah, I could see that. That's pretty common now. Let's create, what we think the end game is, and once they've hit that point, we've already been working on, the additions to it. I don't think anybody really, well, everybody's going to complain about something, but that at least is in some ways logical.
Yeah.
But steal that. You can put that question out on Reddit. I would love to hear what other people might think. So, as we're talking about things that could get dropped, we have to, well, as I suggested earlier, we have to solve the problem of itemization. You and
we can do it.
I have a pen and paper right here. I will happily jot this down. We're going to figure it out. Itemization is, I think, is the most hotly debated topic about Diablo IV right now, out of everything, and I think it's foolish not to talk about it, so that at least there is a myriad of feedback that they can maybe look at. Whether or not they choose to do anything, I don't know. I'm not a game developer. I don't know the intricacies of the decisions that happen. However, I am a game player, and I feel like my opinion should be heard. So this is the internet, and that's what we're going to do. The itemization that they've brought up right now is the progression of white items to blue items to rare items, and then we fall into this legendary set kind of trap, and then we get mythics right at the tail end. As you were playing, I'm sure you got some of those drops. How did that feel? I know it's still early on, but like just that picking up those pieces of gear, did you have any association with it? Was anything exciting?
So the demo was definitely very limited in scope. So there were no mythics dropping, there were no sets dropping. There were maybe like 3 or 4 legendaries that were available. And then of course your whites, magic, and rare items. I didn't focus too much on the items. I'm gonna be honest. Like I looked at the legendary and I was like, "Ooh, Stone of Jordan, cool. That's a familiar one." It was more about the feel of everything, and I can't say I was super excited about anything. But then again, I wasn't going to be able to keep any of that loot without stealing one of the computers from Blizzcon. So,
did you try that?
I did not want to be escorted out of there by police.
Well, there's always next year. Because, who knows? Maybe you'll just get a sweet souvenir then. But obviously, since being involved in the community, you've seen this discussion. Is there anything concerning to you about that progression?
So I think there's some good and some bad. The good thing is I think the developers are well aware of the pitfalls of set items from Diablo 3. So Diablo 3 right now is basically dominated by sets.
Correct.
For the most part, and the sets are fairly limiting in terms of what skills you can use. Sure, there's a little bit of innovation, a little bit of push and shove, depending on which season you're in. But for the most part, you're like, okay, I'm going, Uliana's set this season, or I'm going Jade Harvester's set, and that's your build. You already know where you're headed for, however long you're playing the season.
Right.
So I do like the new philosophy of using sets as maybe build starters.
Yeah.
You give a path to newer players. Be like, oh, maybe you should try like synergizing these skills together, or choose this, and we'll give you a bonus, and you'll be able to clear higher content, maybe get some better loot as a result. I'm intrigued by the new mythics. I know there's been a lot of variety on this. It really depends on how often they drop and what they end up looking like, but I like that you can only have one equipped, and that can be like your build defining item potentially.
Yeah, I think that has a lot of cool potential where you find an awesome mythic item. You're like, oh, I am going to build a Frostbolt Sorceress based off of this item because it's going to make the build just shine. I think that could totally work, and since it is limited to one, you're not going to be like, okay, now I need to get the mythic helmet, I need to get the mythic whatever it is.
Yep.
I think my biggest concern in looking at itemization is that there's no place for an awesome rare. And I've always liked rares as this nice little, I don't know, RNG kind of mitigating factor. Like I can't find the helmet, the mythic helmet I've been looking for, but you know what? I can craft a rare one that's pretty good. That will get me there until I can find the ultimate item I've been looking for. And it just seems like if I'm not, at least in the system that they have right now, if I'm not using a set or a legendary, then I'm not doing it right.
Yeah, it's definitely a complicated issue. I know we've got limited time to solve this issue, but
no, we're going to do it. I said we would. No,
okay.
You're absolutely right. Like it is a super complicated thing, but I think at the heart of it is the crux of a good Diablo game, a game that I keep playing, because there's always something new to find, and I think you're absolutely right that mythics might be that great chase. Like there might be a great chase in the mythics, in finding a mythic that's really going to make things work. I just worry about it whether or not that's enough, where you're just like, I'm just kind of stuck just trying to find that one mythic. And as a result, you then start to lose interest more in your character because, it just doesn't feel complete yet, as opposed to having a robust crafting system that will allow you to kind of build towards something as opposed to just hunting until you find the right item.
Yeah, and you bring up the crafting system, and I think a lot of the item is like it's hard to say conclusively if the itemization is going to be great or not without knowing how much variety and legendary items are we going to get. Are we really getting thousands of legendaries?
Right.
And what their effects are? What are they? How do they interact with each other? The crafting system you mentioned as well, like that's a super important, as you said, RNG mitigating way to get gear. How is that going to work in Diablo 4? And I totally get the rare, finding that sweet rare amulet, and it has +3 to all Druid skills or whatever, and that might be better than something that affects your werewolf charge. I just find it very difficult to have concrete feelings about how the itemization needs to be without seeing more of the greater context.
Right.
I can see where the Diablo 4 developers are coming from, where they want maybe a smoother progression rather than what one might say is maybe a little bit unintuitive, right? Because in many other games, World of Warcraft included, there's a clear progression of common items, magic items, rares, epics, legendaries, and each tier is better than the other. That's not been the case in the Diablo franchise, and it seems to be like a very iconic part of Diablo 2.
Right.
So I don't know if the developers really want to exclude that important facet.
Yeah, I think with the attention for Diablo 4 and looking back on Diablo 3 as well, that I in some ways pity the developers because I don't think they will be able to create a system that will please everybody.
But we will.
Yeah, absolutely. We're just so close. No, because there's no great system. If Path of Exile had done it, everybody would be playing Path of Exile, and we wouldn't need a Diablo 4. If Diablo 3 had done it, well, then we would just be remaking Diablo 3. If Diablo 2 had done it, they would just copy that over. There isn't a perfect system yet, and I applaud them for branching out and doing something different. But I think it's also, it is. I would be wary that they just don't make the mistakes that have happened in the past. And I think that's the one thing about like the development team changing. Not that I want the group that made Diablo 3 to make Diablo 4, but if you look at the team from Diablo 1 to Diablo 2, that item progression and what they were able to do over their time, like they learned a lot of things that made the game better. Whereas now, and it's not obviously a completely brand new team, but when you have a bunch of new people coming in and starting from scratch, well, you're probably going to hit the same roadblocks that a group from Diablo 3 or Diablo 1 might have had before they started making everything the way that they did.
Yep. There are some things that I do. Well, it's hard to make concrete statements, but there are some things that I would like changed from what we've seen of the itemization so far. And one of the things is this maybe a bit of a simplified holdover from Diablo 3, but of the attack and defense on basically every single item.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was something I was going to save for, possibly a different time, because I feel like that in and of itself warrants almost a whole new podcast. Because now we're talking, all right, not just what type is the item, but what should be on it. Because just generic white, blue, rare, legendary, but then we got to talk about all the other factors and what's important on the item. And I think actually that's a nice place to kind of stop and say maybe our viewers should tune in next time and catch us solve the entire itemization problem. Thoughts?
Yeah, that sounds good. The Who Wants to Be a Millionaire time. We need that ringer.
Yeah.
Like, you're out of time.
So
do it next time.
We're gonna go back to our respected dens. We're gonna pencil out what needs to be on a good item, and we're gonna put this together. And we're gonna figure it out.
Might have to call in some experts.
Maybe we should. But I think it's a nice place to stop and to pick up next time around. All right, you've been listening to the Diablo Podcast. I'd like to thank my guest, Thunderclaww.
Of course, happy to be here. Excited to talk some more about itemization.
Absolutely. And as it is a proper Diablo podcast, we do have to end with a moo. Moo, 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 moo.